Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with the most controversial rabbi on the internet, Rabbi Man. Chaim Coffman, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Doing good.
Good.
Doing very good.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to laugh, but I've repositioned all my screens so I could see more screen, and it didn't work. I'm still trying to play cards stacking on top of cards. I'll get it figured out one of these days. I'm about one computer
As long as you don't
short.
turn me upside down, we're good.
Hey, I know. You remember still? That was like 4 years ago when I did that to you.
I remember everything. That's the problem.
Okay, very good.
You know what they say. If you stay in the past, my Rebbe would say you have no future. But to remember, I can remember things from so long ago. That's good and bad. Depends how you look at it.
My wife said that she can actually remember things that happened at home when she was a year and a half, 18 months old. I'm like, I can't remember things that happened yesterday. I'm just throwing that out there. So
that's it. I mean, okay, I won't go that far back, but definitely.
Yep.
Definitely remember too many things, and it's good and bad. Definitely good and bad. It's got its definitely has its benefits, and and has its detractors.
All right.
That's the way it is.
So tonight, more outrageous claims against the non-Jew in the Talmud. So last week turned out to be quite informative and controversial as well. So, I would expect nothing less from you. I'm just saying.
Well, that's why we do this, right? So, so we mentioned, you mentioned a few examples last week, and we're going to continue certainly with a few examples tonight, no question. And we have to remember, as we always say, you have to keep in mind everything over here, is in context. And Messianics, Christians, Jews, they're non-religious Jews also, look at, statements, that the Talmud makes, that the Gemara makes that, sound somewhat, ludicrous. God forbid. And, people who have an agenda, obviously are not gonna like anything, anything that's said over here. And the reason is very simple, is because, what's being said does not, may not sound politically correct. We don't really care if it's politically correct. Politically correct or not, right? It doesn't really matter. But the point is we have to see things, in context. And, if you take it out of context, then, okay, just admit, you've taken it out of context. You don't want to, that's what you want to do. Or you can say, well, I don't like the answer. We mentioned last week the case of a Jew's ox, let's say, he caused damage to a non-Jew. Right, so a non-Jew has to pay full value if they damage a Jew. If they damage, let's say, a Jew's ox, and by a Jew he doesn't. Right? Why not? Because it's unfair. How can it be? Right? How can it be over here? So there was a technical issue we mentioned. Right? But another answer also is, is that a non-Jew doesn't keep the Noahide laws. They don't keep the Noahide laws.
Hey, Rabbi, do me a favor. I'm going to pause you. Let me. I'm going to insert something for you real fast, just so you can, because that may be part 3 or part 4. There's a lot to this. So, what I'm going to do is, there's a comment that came up, and I think I might have heard something about this before. And it's not for tonight, because you already have a schedule for tonight. But just so that the YouTube viewers will know that we're going to take care of as many comments regarding this topic as we can. This is from S Star asterisk in YouTube chat. Says, let's see. I'm not sure if this is from the Talmud, but maybe it is. I don't know. College educated women are feminists. That women don't have a soul. That single women or a widow attending the services is.
Yeah, there's a lot of statements here that don't sort of make any sense, but I will address it. Just we can address it quickly, and that is that.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Appreciate that.
What someone who's considered a zona, someone who's literally we'll call them a prostitute. That's what's really technical definition, but it's really someone who's promiscuous, right? So I went to university, prestigious university, an Ivy League university, and a lot of intelligent people there, but I'm not going to say it's the most moral, certainly not. So so a person growing up, in that world. In that world, you see what's going on today. Someone told me a few weeks back that, in Boston, where I grew up, so second and third grade, I think by third grade, they're already starting to teach about gender issues, right? So you're talking from a very young age, relatively young age. I'm not talking, that young per se, but, at a relatively young age where promiscuity already starts, right? We're not talking, nobody's living in Victorian England. Right? We're not, you're going to say, well, what do you think? The prude of the prudes, going to be doing certain things. Well, come on. We live in this world. We know what goes on. People see videos, people see movies, people see all kinds of things, a lot of PDA, right? And, in public, etc. So what do we think is going on over here? So, I'll say it by Jews also. Jews who are not attached to Torah, they're no different. We're not gonna say, oh, it's only non-Jews. Plenty of Jews. Unfortunately, plenty of Jews are also, they're promiscuous, as well. So that being said, if they're in university, now there's gonna be a little bit of harsh statement here, right? But if they're in university, I'm gonna even go further. Saying before they get to university, how many women today can still consider themselves virgins? Right, that's not a crazy way out, fanatical, Talmudic statement. We live in this world, we're part of this world, 100%. We're part of this world. So we see what goes on, right? No, who says women don't have a soul, right? I don't know where that comes from, because non-Jews have a soul. Everybody has a soul. Everyone's created in God's image. Maybe. For a non-Jew, the soul makeup is a little bit different. It might not be the same as a Jew, but everybody has a soul. Nobody says they don't have a soul. I mean, that's, animals have a soul. They have an animalistic side. We all have that animalistic side of things we do, right? So, I need to see a source over here to say women don't have a soul. Why? That certainly not a Talmudic statement. I mean, maybe it is. I don't think so. Right, that doesn't jive with anything in Torah. If you want to tell me, why is it, that certain women, or let's say many women, God forbid, can be considered, in this category, and that's because they've been with people they're not allowed to be with, right? Let's say. So again, Jew or non-Jew doesn't really matter, right? It'll disqualify, let's say a convert, we mentioned this before, right? Or a secular Jew, if they've been promiscuous, they can't marry a Kohen, which, people have all kinds of problems with. What? Second-class citizen, I can't marry a Kohen, right? So I understand, why someone would say that, but you have to realize, there's a certain reality, right? And the reality is, as we mentioned before, no one's living in Victorian England, right? We live in this world. So a person's been in a relationship that they're not supposed to be. So there are repercussions. There are blemishes, right? On, because of what a person did. But it doesn't mean a woman doesn't have a soul, right? That doesn't mean that at all. They have a soul. They may have certainly more of an elevated soul in many ways than we do. Why? Because they have less obligation than what men have. Right, but we've sort of, spoken about that when it comes to women's issues, and feminism. When we spoke about that, we can archive that, and see it, when we spoke about it. But who says women don't have a soul? Everything has a soul, right? Plants, they have something there, right? Animals, they have, obviously the animalistic soul means just their programmed DNA. We're not programmed DNA, but again, someone's got that status, of a zona means that they're promiscuous. They've been with somebody or with others that they're not allowed to be with. So if that's the case, so there's a technical issue of now who they can marry, right? They blemish themselves. You're going to say, but it's society and they're brainwashed and there are many reasons, many reasons why, things happen, and things are happening much quicker, much younger, certainly much younger today. I don't think there's any question, right? It doesn't mean they're promiscuous, up to this point, but again, you hear about teenage pregnancies. What do we think is going on? God forbid in this world. That's what's in the secular world. Nothing to talk about, right? That's really nothing to talk about. That's not a statement against, against the Torah, against Judaism and against, what the Talmud says, and all that. I mean, that's a reality. That's a reality today. So there are repercussions. There are absolute repercussions. But to say that, a person doesn't have, a woman doesn't have a soul. I've never seen any such thing. Not only that, everyone's created in God's image. So if everybody, Jew or non-Jew, is created in God's image, that means we all have a soul. Everybody has a soul. Right? Now, again, there might be a difference in, this is Kabbalah 101, 101a, that has to do with the fact that, a non-Jewish soul doesn't have all the same capacities as a Jewish soul. Okay, that's a whole different, that's a whole different thing. But to say that a woman doesn't have a soul, that's a whole different thing, right? The question is, they don't come directly from the earth like men. Well, I have no idea what that means. Well, it says all mankind. God created man, right? It doesn't say God created, you talk about man. Doesn't say just created men from the dust of the earth. I mean, literally, we could learn that. Literally, we could say, well, God created man from the dust of the earth. He's talking about all mankind. He created the form of man, right? Rashi says, like a coin. Every child that's born is going to have the same form. So, they're going to be different in certain ways, right? Obviously, their makeup and different things, but the way they're formed and the way they look is all the same, right? So where's the statement to say that? I mean, again, I could hear literally it says man is created from the dust of the earth. So you could say, well, it means men, not women. I don't know. I've never seen such a thing, right? When it says man's created, it means all men. That means all mankind, right? So, I don't know what that, what that has to do with anything. The soul is going to come from the source, from the, God's heavenly throne, whatever that means. And the soul's going to go into the body. It goes in, there's the soul goes in everybody, right? Non-Jews have the soul also. When the soul goes out, the evil inclination, Mr. S, whatever you want to call him, right? Takes, when a person dies, the soul goes out. Everybody, right? Everybody's like that, right? 100% everybody's like that, so, that's, whatever, there's the whole thing, the whole thing over here. But, to say that women, not created from the earth, I mean, we're all created from the earth. Everything's created from the earth, right? You want to get, Kabbalistic and, men and women created together. They were hermaphrodite. God split them. Okay, that's another issue. That's another issue. It doesn't mean he didn't form mankind in general, right, from the earth. So I guess, we'll leave that at that. But again, just mention one other thing, and the fact that, the Talmud over here, is not saying, this whole thing about women and, look who they are and look what they do and different things. What are we saying over here? There's a reality, right? There's a reality. If there's a reality, we understand. We understand what's going on in the world. It's. I'm not saying men are not promiscuous either, right? But women have a certain status, and if they have a certain status, then they're only going to be able to marry certain people, right? If they want to marry someone, of an elevated soul, they can't, right? They're not going to be able to. Certainly a Jew, it won't make it easy. Forget about a convert. A Jew, their soul, got sullied, it got dirty. You can't fix that. There's no way to fix that. No possible way to fix that. Now let's keep in mind, all the repentance in the world is not going to fix that. Because what's done is done. Right? There's no way to fix it. Right? So that's not, that's not a knock against women. There's just a reality. And if someone enters in that relationship, that's the reality. So, if we all have a soul, right, to say that it's only men, men have, created from the dust of the earth over here, it's only men, not women, then, that's a very hard thing to say, right? Definitely hard, definitely a hard thing. Definitely a hard thing to say. Keep in mind, let's mention one other thing. Keep in mind that when God created man was created at the end of creation. So that means, as some explain, that if mankind does what we're supposed to do, and we follow Torah mitzvahs as a Jew or a non-Jew, right, or a JIT, a Jew in training, whatever you want to call them, right? So if we're doing what we're supposed to do, so then we elevate ourselves. We are the pinnacle of creation. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, we go against our animalistic desires, right? That's what we do. We go according to whatever our desires take us. So we are no different than animals in that sense. Doesn't matter, Jew or non-Jew, right? Totally irrelevant. Person going according to their natural quote unquote instincts, what their desires tell them. So then what does that mean? So commentaries will say, you know what that means? That means that animals are even better than you because they were created first. So if we have a soul, we have to use the soul properly, right? Meaning we have to do what we need to do in spiritual terms. And if not, we're no different than animals. Totally not different than animals. Now, you see plenty of people, come on, they have a soul. You see, they eat, they drink, they do other things, do all kinds of things. Yeah, but if they're not acting in a spiritual way, in many different scenarios, they're no different than animals. Again, Jews or non-Jews, doesn't matter, right? We're not going to distinguish over here, right? So in that sense, we have to understand there are repercussions which nobody ever wants to hear, and that is the repercussions for what we do. And if someone acts in such a way, and they have this status, well, guess what? You can't marry Cohen, right? That Jew is not going to be able to marry Cohen because they've sullied themselves. That's what they've done. You're going to say it's natural and there's attraction and there's this and it's hormone. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't mean it's right? Just because people act in a certain way, certainly doesn't mean it's right? So in that sense, okay, so they have to take responsibility for what they do. But yeah, you take someone in a university, environment. I'm just going to quote what one of the Torah giants of the last generation, Rav Victor Miller, blessed memory, said. He said, yeah, you know what a university dorm is? He says, like a brothel. That's what it is. What do people think is going on there? Some more, some less, whatever it is. You got to say, wow, what a radical statement to say. Well, but what's going on out there? We said there's a reality of, what's going on. I'm not saying everybody's doing it, whatever, but, when you're in that type of environment, you're in that, close proximity, and you have bathrooms that are shared and it's co-ed. I mean, it's hard to imagine, other things not going on at the same time. So I guess that's what, that's what we say over here. So, we'll give another example. The Talmud in Yevamos 98a talks about a case of a non-Jew, and that a non-Jew is considered like an animal. Now, before we clarify the statement, a Jew that acts like a non-Jew, that doesn't keep Torah mitzvahs, we mentioned, they're no different, right? They're no different over here. But here the Torah singles out non-Jews. Now, at first glance, you're going to say, what? Non-Jews are considered like an animal. I could easily say if they're not going, if they're not listening to what the Torah says, they're not keeping the Noahide laws, even a Jew would be the same thing if they're not keeping Torah, right? I easily could say they're no different than an animal, right? But what's the context over here? We're talking about a father who's a non-Jew, right? The case of an Egyptian or a non-Jewish father. not spiritually connected to his child that converts, right? Now let's keep in mind, let's say you got non-Jewish parents, that child ends up converting. Let's say the parents don't convert. And even if the parents do convert, the parents are considered, any converts considered like a newborn baby. So their status totally changed from who they were before. Now, technically, somebody's going to say, but they're connected to the child. They're 100% connected to the child, right? They're their blood, so to speak, true. But once a person converts, technically speaking, they're not connected to their parents. They're not spiritually connected. Physically, they're connected, right? Physically, there's a connection. So here we're talking about a father who's not Jewish, who's connected, not spiritually connected to the child that converts, right? Because as we mentioned, a convert is considered like a newborn baby. No connection, to the parents, technically speaking, no connection to their siblings, right? Interesting case. I know someone, next number of weeks, that 2 kids are getting married, whatever, I shouldn't say kids, adults, whatever, getting married. And who are they? They are cousins. Actually, they're first cousins, right? You have 2 brothers, and their kids are getting married. Now, someone's going to say, well, what about genetics? What about this? So technically speaking, there's nothing wrong with it over here. First of all, even if you tell me, that they're cousins, the 2 fathers are converts. Right? The converts. So really, they have no connection spiritually to their kids. But their kids are born Jewish. Right? So really, the fact that the parents are converts doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot over here, because the kids themselves are Jewish. So if the kids themselves, are born Jewish, so can cousins get married? They can get married. They get married over here. Right? Now people are going to say, come on, it's a little bit strange. You have cousins get married. So I would say it's more practical in a certain way. You only have to invite one side of the family to the wedding. You save on wedding expenses, right? But, an uncle can marry a niece. That's permissible, right? That's definitely permissible. So you see, maybe by some Hasidim they married, first cousins, second cousins, right? That's not unheard of. I'm not going to say it's so unbelievably common, but that definitely happens. Right, it's not not necessarily an issue, but over here, what's the case, right? We don't say Egypt. The Torah tells me were steeped in absolute immorality, right? One of the most immoral places ever to exist in the history of man. That's what the Torah tells me. Now, the fact that the Jews went down there, they almost got destroyed, right? They almost reached the level where they couldn't return in spiritual terms. But over here, what are we saying? We're saying that we're not just saying, well, Egyptians are steeped in immorality, right? We're not going to say that, well, if that's the case, we don't know who the father is, right? We don't know who the father is over here. So generally, though, we do know who the father is. So today, it's a whole different thing because, that you can prove paternity, you can prove by a DNA test, right? That 100% for sure, right? So you could say, well, even though we know who the father is today, we don't know the connection. We don't see a spiritual connection. If we don't see a spiritual connection, so what's that person considered? You're going to say, well, they're created in the image of God. You're right. They're created in the image of God, but they don't have a connection spiritually over here, right? If they don't have a connection spiritually, what's their status? You're going to say they're human. Again, let's make clear. If a person is not connected to Torah mitzvahs, what are they connected to? What in the world are they connected to? They're connected to this world. They're connected to physicality. They're connected to their animalistic soul. That's what they're connected to. So if that's the case, is there any difference between them and an animal? Technically speaking, we'd say there's no difference. Oh, come on. It's against non-Jews. What are we saying over here? We're saying there's no spiritual connection. If there's no spiritual connection, what's their status? Right? Again, you have to see what it means over here. In context, say, see, what a Messianic's going to say? What are they going to say? See, non-Jews are considered like animals. Why? Why? Ask the question. Don't just throw out a statement. What's the case referring to? Right? So that's one example. That's one example. We also see that a non-Jew, there's an idea what we call Levirate marriage, right? Or chalitza, right? What we do today is called chalitza. What we don't do is what we call yibum. What is yibum? We learn out yibum from the story of Tamar, right? We go back to the story of Tamar, and she's married to Er, right? He spills seed, doesn't want to have children. God takes him. So who has to marry? Who has to marry Tamar? If he's got a brother, right? He's got a brother who's going to do what we call libum, right? Over here, he's going to be with her, have a child, right? Normally, it's by somebody who is married. They don't have children, and so the brother, has to be over here to be with his sister-in-law, and that's permissible. That would, according to the Torah, would be permissible, and therefore they have a child. Right? They would have a child. They would have a male child. That male child would be named after the dead brother. So that's what we call yibum. And we don't do it today because it's not really done. Right? It wouldn't be done for the sake of heaven. That's what the rabbis were worried about. So if that's the case, we do another thing called chalitza. Right? A chalitza is, you take a shoe and you have a whole gathering, and the woman has to spit and whatever. It's the whole thing, and not very common today. When it does happen, so a rabbinical court is going to publicize it, because again, it's not so common. And then there are statements made according to the Torah that you're not going to marry me, and so this is the reaction, this is the repercussions, and and all that. So a non-Jew over here cannot do Levirate marriage, right? Now, what's the problem? Here we see, well, isn't there a problem with paternity? Maybe the problem with paternity over here. No problem with paternity. We know who the father is, right? We know who the father is because he's going to marry, or he's going to be with, right, his sister-in-law. So we know who the person is, right? That's not an issue. What's the issue? The issue is there's a legal principle, right? A legal principle over here that voided the paternity. They avoided their paternity. Doesn't mean we don't know who it is, right? It's a technical issue. Now people will say, come on, technical issue. You're going to say that their seed is not worth anything and all that's a technical issue, right? How can it be? Right? How can it be? We're talking about a case, again, of a non-Jewish father and Jewish child. Right? It's simple biological facts without legal significance over here. So it's a technical issue. So again, what could people say? Come on, you're going to go that far, and the rabbis are going to go that far. What's the case? Right? What's the case? Don't turn Coffman would say, do not turn the Torah into a pretzel. Right? Don't go looking for things that aren't there. Right? But someone here points out, yeah, church has been doing it for thousands of years. Right? Burning the Talmud, other things. Right? Of course, understood. But we have to understand. We have to understand things in context. If you don't, it doesn't matter if you like the answer or not. It's not. We have to remember as well. It's not the answer. We have to remember when the rabbis tell us something. Oh, this is permitted because of this, or this is forbidden because of that. The rabbis do not give every last answer and every last reason. There could be 150 reasons why, but they don't tell us, right? So therefore, if there's, let's say if there's a mitzvah that the reason for the mitzvah today, let's say, would not apply. Let's say it wouldn't apply. So if it wouldn't apply, there's a difference of opinion among rabbinical authorities whether we have to keep the mitzvah or not. Meaning some rabbinical authorities will say, okay, if that's the reason for the mitzvah doesn't apply, right? Not that it doesn't fit into my worldview, right? Let's not make that mistake. Not that, I don't like the reason or whatever. Let's say the reason just doesn't apply. Technical reason, it doesn't apply today. If it doesn't apply today, then what are the rabbis going to tell us? What are some rabbinical authorities going to say? You don't have to do it, right? It's going to be irrelevant today because it doesn't apply. Okay, but other rabbis are going to tell you, even if it doesn't apply, even if the reason doesn't apply, who says that's the reason? Could be 150 reasons, as we said. But the rabbis don't tell us. They don't give us all the reasons. It could be other reasons that they didn't tell us. So therefore, these rabbis will say, doesn't matter if the reason doesn't apply. You still have to keep it. You still have to do it. Why? Because that's not the reason. Right? Could have been other reasons. Right? So, there are both schools of thought. And it apply in different ways. Right? Not really, obviously not the topic for now, but I'm just pointing out, this idea. So what do we see over here? We have an illusion over here telling me, sorry, not an illusion, but the case over here of a non-Jewish father and a Jewish child, right? That child converts. So there's no connection spiritually to that child. Right? Physically, obviously, there is. So now, if that's the case, so what's the status over here? It's a technical issue, right? That's one thing. We'll give another example. We'll give another example over here. Another example is if we look at Avodah Zarah 36b. Avodah Zarah 36b, Talmud there discusses a decree over non-Jewish girls that they have the status of a nida, right? A woman, has a menstrual cycle when they're born. Now you're going to say, come on, any child that's born, any girl that's born, how in the world can they have that status, right? So, according to biology, that certainly wouldn't be the case. Right? It's going to take a number of years later, for that to happen. But why did the rabbis tell us that there's a decree that these non-Jewish girls have that status? And that is so Jewish boys will stay away, right? Not from the first day, obviously, it doesn't make sense. I'm not talking about the first day over here, right? But the Talmud discusses the severity of intermarrying with non-Jews. So here it's a decree, so they should never intermingle, right? If they have that status, can't have anything to do with them, right? At a later age, not talking about now, but you give them that status in order that we don't want Jews to intermarry with non-Jews. And there are a number of decrees, rabbinic decrees that seem a little bit far out there. One of when it comes to let's say non-Jewish wine, or let's say better, or let's say Jewish wine that is not been pasteurized or not been cooked. If a non-Jew touches it, a Jew's not allowed to drink it, right? If the bottle's open, right? Why? So I'm going to call it spiritual cooties, right? But what's the reason? We're worried they're going to use this wine for idolatry, for a wine libation. That's what we're afraid of. Now, what's the problem? You're going to say, well, most non-Jews out there, they're not using this wine and putting it on an altar. They're not using it for idolatry. Okay, but the rabbis made a decree on that wine and regular wine, whether they're going to use it for idolatry or not. Why? They don't want Jews and non-Jews to intermingle. That's the whole point. They don't want any way, shape, or form that non-Jews and Jews should have any connections. That's going to lead to intermarriage. So there are a number of decrees. That's one of them. And it's a severe decree. It's a severe decree. What if they touch that wine, and now that wine gets mixed up, in other wine or other things? Can a Jew drink it? You're going to say, come on. Most people are not doing that. You're right. And even if they're not doing it, the rabbi said it doesn't matter. It's a decree. We made a decree from that type of wine, the regular type of wine, and we don't want Jews and non-Jews to be together. We don't want them to go to parties together. We don't want them to drink together and all this. Why not? What's it going to lead to? We know what it's going to lead to. We see what goes on today, unfortunately, in the Jewish world. You got 60, 70% intermarriage. Why do you think that the number is so high? Because they're together all the time. They're together in school, in public school, private school, whatever, high school, university. They work together. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Say, well, I'd really love to marry you. This Jew says, this non-Jewish woman, but what can I do? The Torah says, I'm not allowed to. And it's very important to me and blah, blah, blah. Like, what's going to happen? We know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to end up intermarrying because there are no barriers. When you have no barriers, then, it's obvious. So here the rabbis made, a number of decrees, and some of them unbelievably severe over here, right? That's what don't we want? What don't we want? We don't want intermarriage. We're not interested in intermarriage. Totally not interested, in intermarriage. So the rabbis made a whole number of decrees, for whatever you want to say, in order that should not happen. Also, non-Jewish boys, we're not going to discriminate here, just mention about non-Jewish girls, they're also given the status of a ziva, right? We're talking about a male who has seemingly a seminal emission and are impure. They're also impure. Now, again, even from a young age, why? Why give such a status? Right? Why giving such a status over here? Right? So we're saying that a Jewish boy over here should not associate frequently with him. For what purpose? Homosexuality. Right? Torah prohibition. Leviticus chapter 18. Right? It doesn't matter if the person has a certain disposition or not, or whatever the case is. We hold it's forbidden. So also we don't want to have that. We don't want it to lead to that. And if a Jewish child would frequent an idolater child, that could be brought to that. That could happen. Right? It's an abominable practice. Now, someone's going to say, come on, we're worried about non-Jews. You really think this is going to happen? Again, look what's going on in the world today. We can use today as a good example. Right? I don't think things were different in the Roman Empire. They also did all kinds of, crude things and, were immoral and decadent, and all that. We're not living in Victorian England, as we said. So over here, isn't this a possible reality that we're going to be, part of their schools? We're going to hang out with them. Certainly could lead to that. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to question it today. And we see how powerful that group is, and what their influence is in the world. I mean, imagine, I couldn't even imagine this, my wildest dreams. When I was growing up, imagine someone had told me as a kid, let's say 40 years ago or more, and they say, listen, you got to be careful which bathroom you walk into. How do you know which bathroom to walk into? I'm like, what are you talking about? There's a men's room. There's a woman's room. Like, what's the question? Right? What would be the question? You got to say, no, come on. In 40 years, there's going to be a whole question about gender. There's going to be a whole question, who we are. Who do we relate to? Who am I really? Which bathroom am I going to go into? I would have said, what are you, a crackpot? Come on. Someone makes someone would have made a movie, and they would have introduced that idea. Who's going to think, come on, future, this, that's really going to happen? We see what goes on. We see what goes on today. That's not a far-fetched reality. That's the reality, unfortunately, we live in today. So if a person's part of that world and hangs out with these type of people, in general, what's it going to lead them to? We know what it's, potentially what it's going to lead them to. Now, does it mean every single child or, young adult going to hang out with these people? We're going to say 100% of the time that's what's going to happen? No. We're not going to say that, right? But is there potential for it to happen? Yeah. So a lot of times the rabbis made decrees. They're not adding to the Torah. That's another mistake, right? That they're going to say, see, they're adding. They're not allowed. The Moshe Rabbeinu says you're not allowed to add or subtract to the Torah. This is not adding to the Torah. We're making a fence. I'm not making up new laws here. They're not saying, okay, I have to add another string for my tzitzis. I have to add another compartment for my phylacteries, for my tefillin. That's adding. Or if I take one away, that's subtracting. But if they're making a fence around the Torah, for goodness sakes, and they want to make sure things should not lead to intermarriage or to other more severe sins, whatever it is. So that's making a fence around the Torah does not mean in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is I'm adding to the Torah, right? So here, the rabbis bent over backwards in certain decrees, certainly unbelievable decrees, that are so severe because of this, because they don't want us to have close contact with non-Jews. We live in a non-Jewish world. We may have contact anyway. But they want to limit that contact to the extent that there won't be intermarriage. And it won't lead to intermarriage. And they were right. Why are they right? Because we see the more connection we have to that world, the more connection we're going to have to intermarriage. Right? There's no question. That's what it leads to. The writing, certainly on the wall. I don't think there's any. I don't even think that's debatable. Because we see 60%, 70%, some places 80, 85%. Intermarriage. So the rabbis weren't fools. They understood the more contact you have, right, with non-Jews, that's what it could lead to. Now, one of the best things that could have ever happened to the Jewish people, is that the fact that they live in Jewish communities. They live in what we call a Jewish ghetto. When the Jews were let out of the ghetto, right, one of the worst things, Napoleon did, was, at least for the Jewish community, was he took them out of the ghetto. He let them out of the ghetto. And what did they do when they were out of the ghetto? They weren't all together and all that. They assimilated, they intermarried. And that, for the Jewish people, is the absolute kiss of death. And it's happened in history over and over and over. You take the Judaism out of the Jews, they become like non-Jews, they're going to intermarry, they're going to do whatever, right? And that's what we see today. 90% of the Jewish people do not know Shema Yisrael. They don't know Shema Yisrael. They don't know anything. They don't know anything about their own heritage, right? They've given up their heritage for nothing. I remember someone telling me when they, became religious, their siblings would say, but you think you're right, and you think you have the truth, and you're delegitimizing, us. But it's not like they're saying, it's not like they're fighting over here, and they're saying, oh, I want to understand Torah, I want to understand the mitzvahs, I want to understand why you think that way. They got what's their reaction? Their reaction is, you're 100% a nutcase, you're 100%, fanatic. And all that. And they want to do what they want to do. Okay? They can do what they want to do. There are repercussions. And a lot of times, majority of the time, what are they going to do? They're going to assimilate, if they're not assimilated already, and they're going to intermarry. That's the end result. If they marry Jewish, I think it's a miracle. In today's day and age, I have cousins, my father's brother, he grew up Reform, talking 90 years ago. Grew up Reformed, 3 out of their 4 kids married Jews. That's an anomaly. That doesn't exist. That should not exist. I would say the opposite. 3 out. If you would have asked me, what are the odds? I would have said all 4 should have intermarried. No question about it. The fact that 3 married Jews, not because of Judaism over here. However reason it happened, right? So I got nieces, nephews, cousins, first cousins, second cousins, whatever. They're all intermarried. Most of them, not all of them. But why? Very simple. You're part of that world. That's what it leads to. So the rabbis understood if you allow that to happen and you have that connection, right? That's the end result. So it's not like there are all these pogroms, certainly going on today, and Jews, for Jews, God forbid it would be kiss the cross or die. We're not going to be given that challenge today because a lot of people would kiss the cross because it doesn't mean anything. Right? A lot of Jews doesn't mean a whole lot. So they say, fine, I want to live. So, some people won't. Maybe it's, part of their soul makeup and they wouldn't do it. But some are so far gone, it wouldn't bother them. Now, someone could tell me, but, the Pinto Yid, the spark of the Jew, how could they kiss the cross? If that spark is buried and it's pretty much dead, I can certainly understand. But that's not really the point. The point is that we're doing it to ourselves, willingly, because they don't think there's anything. They don't think there's anything in Torah, right? And they just throw this out there. There are a number of people became religious, got involved in, Near Eastern religion, and, they had a connection. A number of people have the Dalai Lama of all people, that had a connection to him, and he sent them back to Jerusalem to learn Torah. That we have nothing to offer you here. You're Jewish, you have a whole heritage. And there are a number of people who ended up becoming religious and Orthodox Jews on account of the Dalai Lama of all people, right? So, but we're doing it to ourselves because people don't think there's anything in religion. There's anything, in the Jewish religion, right? It's all about this and that. It's all antiquated. They just never learned, right? Majority of people, have never learned. But over here, you're going to say, come on, this is a crazy idea. This is a crazy idea. Non-Jewish girls, from a day born, come on, let's look at biology. If you look at biology, you're going to say that's not going to happen for another 12 years, or more, or whatever it is. By a boy, come on, you gotta tell me that it's going to have this, seemingly a seminal emission. It's going to, blemish him or whatever, in different ways. So no, the whole point is we don't want to have any connection, Jews and non-Jews, and not only that, you put them in such a situation, right? They are prone to fail, right? They are prone to fail over here. That's, that's the problem. We're not going to test ourselves. We're not interested in bringing tests, and tests upon ourselves. It's hard enough we have the test that we do. But to say, okay, I'm going to thrust myself in that environment, right? I'm going to thrust myself in that environment, and I'm still going to stay the same, right? And so again, this is the question. It gets back to, about going to university, and being part of that, environment. And in the modern Orthodox world, they're very proud of their kids. They go to Ivy League schools. Okay? Go to Princeton, go to Yale, go to Columbia, wherever, but they will admit, they want to be doctors, lawyers, who knows what, the parents will admit, and the people themselves, who go to university, they will admit their religiosity is not the same as when they went in. Now, it could be they didn't go in very strong, could very well be. Or even if they are very strong, their resolve gets weaker. There are some places where, there are Orthodox groups on campus and they are, stronger, okay, right? But as I heard a great rabbi once say, so, I'll send my kids to university if you can show me and prove to me they would come out more moral or as moral as that when they went in. So obviously we know what that environment's going to be. We know the heresy, many things are going to be taught. You have to be strong, right? You have to be very strong. But at the same time, and I hear this a number of times, not just necessarily from university, right? But I hear many, many times a non-Jew interested in conversion. Why are they interested in conversion? Not 100% because they're necessarily seeking truth. I mean, majority of them are, right? But I've heard a number of cases where how did the non-Jew get involved in Judaism, of all things? Because they met an Orthodox Jew. Whether a guy, a girl, whatever it is, right? They met an Orthodox Jew and they want to learn more about Judaism. Now, you're going to say, wow, that's so interesting. They met an Orthodox Jew. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That's going to spark their interest. But why is it going to spark their interest? It wasn't just like a chance happening over here. They just happened to meet this, non-Jewish, lab partner or whatever, and just go, No, what happened? They got to know each other. They start to like each other. So now this person sees, well, this might be a major barrier over here. The fact this person is an Orthodox Jew. But I always ask the question, okay, very good. You met this Orthodox Jew. What's this Orthodox Jew doing with you? What is he or her doing with you? It's usually a guy with a girl, usually, right? But I said, so, how Orthodox can he be if he's hanging out with you? But that's how the person got involved in Judaism, right? Again, I've heard many cases like this. They met in university, they met at work, they met whatever, different, different scenarios. Different scenarios. So if your guard is not up and you don't have boundaries, so this could happen. So again, you'll tell me, well, the person, has good values and this and that, but, how did they get caught up in such a thing? How is it possible? It's possible because you don't set up boundaries. Persons at work, persons in, any type of environment where you're dealing with, let's say for a guy or a woman, doesn't really matter, and you're dealing with, secular Jews, non-Jews, different things, different aspects over here. So a person has to have boundaries. You have to make boundaries. And if you don't make boundaries, what can happen? We know what can happen. You get involved in projects, you get involved in other things. One thing leads to another. So what do people do? What should people do? What people should do is they should nip it in the bud. Meaning that, okay, you have to work with them. You have to have a connection with them. But it shouldn't be so personal. There have to be boundaries. I know of a woman that any friend of her husband, she will never, ever address them by their first name. They'll always say, oh, Rabbi so-and-so, or Mr. so-and-so. They will never, ever address someone of the opposite sex with their first name. You're going to say, come on, isn't that, a little bit backwards over here? No, you'd speak to someone, you're in a first name basis. I'm not going to say it's going to lead to intimacy. I'm not going to say that, but, that's already a barrier broken down, right? It's already a boundary over here, right? That boundary is already gone, right? So you're going to say, but you really think if someone calls them by the first name again, it's not just a formality, right? There's somewhat of a friendship. There's a kinship over here. You have to work with them. You work on projects, doing different things. You're around them. So is it possible? I'm just going to throw out this crazy idea. Is it possible something more could happen? Being in that environment? Of course something could happen. You want to tell me it's, it doesn't happen the majority of the time, and people, this, that, okay? Even if that's true, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Definitely doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And there are stories we don't even get into, about the internet and other things. There are stories of people, got involved in social media, and stories of a Jewish guy, got, 5, 6 kids, whatever, maybe not so happy in his marriage, who knows what, whatever the case is, ends up meeting, a non-Jewish woman, leaves his wife, and that's it. Now, you're going to say, is that common? It's happened. There are cases that have happened. My Rabbi told me a story. And there are countless cases. People meet, others, online. It's a very slippery slope over here. So they say, well, you're also online. Yeah, you got to be careful. 100% you got to be careful. There have to be boundaries. No question. But if you don't have boundaries, right? If you don't have boundaries over here, don't you think something, in the future, possibly this, that, something could happen, once you let your guard down. And even if nothing happens with someone of the opposite sex, and intimacy and all that, but once you let your guard down, and you're introduced maybe to things that you shouldn't see, shouldn't waste your time with, different things. So now you've been exposed to things that, are problematic. And now it takes a lot of willpower, it takes a lot of self-sacrifice, right? In order to fix that. There's no question. And I think that, for some people, let's say younger people, when they get involved, they say that, if you tell someone, oh, it's forbidden, don't look at it, don't this, that. And then they open up their eyes and they see there's a whole world. And there's a whole world out there. And then they get exposed, so to speak, to all these things that go against what the Torah says, and many different things. So then you would ask them along the lines, well, they're suffering from different things. So you would ask them, come on, is this really, are you better off now? So you're going to say curiosity killed the cat. You're right. And, and it can destroy a person, totally destroy a person. Once a person hears things they shouldn't hear, or they see things they shouldn't hear, or they shouldn't see, right? It has an effect on the soul. Those images are in the soul. They don't disappear. You got to work very, very hard to make them disappear. But once a person's been exposed, it's very hard to go back to who they were. Almost impossible. Pretty much impossible. Because then it doesn't stop there. It snowballs. Right? That's what happens. Right? So yeah, we got a little bit off topic here, but the point is that the rabbis understood clear as day. They understood clear as day how bad these things are and how bad this interaction is. So they wanted to nip it in the bud in many ways, and they made a whole bunch of decrees so this wouldn't happen. So they wouldn't intermarry. So they wouldn't have these connections, so to speak. Because once the person, is in that world, it's very hard to be insular. Very, very hard. And if a person does not set up boundaries upon boundaries upon boundaries, it's better to be looked at as a square and unsocial, and this and that than to give in to temptation. Right? And a person could be in such situations, let's say in the work environment. A person in the work environment, you're not working at home, right? You're in a work environment. There are a lot of things. A lot of things. What people say, what people look at, how they talk, all kinds of things that can have a negative effect, tremendously negative effect. So a person, setting up boundaries is crucial. 100%, it's going to be crucial over here for the sole reason that you're playing with fire. And a person only understands that after the fact, right? A person, will say, but listening to radio, like what could be so bad, listening to radio, so it depends what you listen to. I would say, certainly the news, nothing good in the news, and all talk radio probably pretty much Lashon Hara fest anyway, what people are saying, right? But, I know if someone spiraled out of control, by listening to the radio, okay, what do they get into? Many, many years ago, who did they get into? Howard Stern, right? Howard Stern, you gotta say, oh, come on, that, it's a little bit of extreme, listening to him as a young adult and this and that, okay, right? But, A leads to B leads to C, and, the rest happens. So you gotta say, but it doesn't have to be so extreme. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be so extreme. But once, the problem is, once you let a little bit in, the problem is you open up a Pandora's box, a huge, Pandora's box. I'll give one example. We've spoken about this before, right? And I'll end with this. That takes somebody who from a relatively young age, grew up as a big sports fanatic or a big movie watcher. And then tell them, okay, maybe it's just a waste of time, certainly for a Jew. Maybe it's a waste of time, or maybe you get certain bad values, whatever it is. Now tell them you understand how the world works. You understand the repercussions for our actions. You understand the values might not be good and other things. Now tell them to quit cold turkey. Someone who has that in their system, you're going to have to work unbelievably to get rid of it. Unbelievably to get rid of it. And to say, well, it's nothing. It's a waste of time. I have to answer for it. After 120 years, all these different things, it's all true, right? But but at the end of the day, it's still part of them. It's still in their system, right? So something like that, okay, that's a little more, these things are a little more innocuous, right? We're not talking about immorality and other things, right? So they might be a little more innocuous, but the reality is, that's something that's hard to give up. Because it's enjoyable, it's fun. It doesn't matter, you're wasting time, whatever. But it's, it is what it is, and people get enjoyment. Even if they don't play it, they get enjoyment out of watching it. So some people today, it's not the same as it was before. Okay, it doesn't matter. But the point is, they enjoy it. Who doesn't enjoy, seeing certain types of movies or whatever. People do, people don't, whatever the case is. But it's very easy to get caught up. Since it's so easy to get caught up, now once you understand what the reality is and what my obligations are in the world, what's the problem? How do I stop it? How do I stop it? Let's say a person's going through a difficult time. right? They go through a lot of stress. What do I want to do? I want to kick back and, I want to watch this, or I want to see that, or I just want to veg my mind because, life is hard, right? So, when a person is under stress, a lot of things go out the window. But when a person's under stress, you could get back into all these bad habits. So, again, the rabbis, definitely understood this. Obviously, we didn't get certainly as far as I thought we would. So we're going to have a part 3.
Of course
we're definitely going to have a part 3 next week, and we'll discuss more terrible things. God forbid the Talmud says against non-Jews.
Yes, and ironically, there's plenty of them if you look at them from the wrong website. There's tons of them if you look at them from the wrong websites.
I remember when we started this years ago, right? And I said, I Googled it and I saw this whole list, like people put up like this whole list of statements. I'm like, wow, these are really good questions. I'm like, I hope we have answers. I was like, I wonder what the answer's going to be over here. But yeah, if you look at it at face value and you take it out of context, it looks,
so far,
it definitely looks crazy.
So far, every claim that I personally have heard and researched myself turned out to be a dead end for Christianity. Because it's like they're taking things way out of context, and actually people trying to study the Talmud on their own without having any context. It's kind of like, I guess it would be not far off from somebody who was trying to study, books from like brain surgery without actually going to college, right?
Right.
And so you can be misled.
There are people out there, and I get this a lot. What you're saying is definitely true, and I see how it not only destroys people, but it just skews the way they think because, well, Talmud's in English. I can learn it in English. Art Scroll is very good. They do a very good job, but Talmud has to be learned under someone who knows how to learn.
Right.
We're not saying, you can read the English. There was a story one of our rabbis told me, these priests, confronted him, when he was much younger, and asked him, want to study the Talmud, want to study Baba Kama. And he started asking them. He said, it's unbelievable. He said they knew it backwards and forwards. They could repeat it verbatim. The only problem is they didn't understand anything. Because he started asking them certain questions they couldn't answer. So it's kind of like the movie The Frisco Kid. I read their Holy Torah. Didn't understand a single word.
Gene Wilder.
Right? So, but I see people quote things and say things, and like it's not even worth it to answer because they're not holding anywhere in the world. And they think, wow, look at this and look at that and different things. And you have to have someone who's going to teach you, for sure.
And you can't even answer them like the people who come and charge Jews with this. You can't answer them because they're not open to any interpretation except for the one they've already heard. Which is
right,
and
really they obviously they obviously have an agenda, right? They have an agenda as well, where they're not going to listen to what you have to say anyway. But that's definitely true.
Very good. Okay, thank you all for tuning in. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click on the notification bell. Turn on all notifications. There are 3 options on that. Turn on all notifications so that anything, even if I post something just in the chat, you'll actually get a message from it, letting you know when we have shows canceling, shows airing, if we have a new show. If you don't subscribe and turn on all notifications, you will miss those important notifications. So thank you all for tuning in. And Rabbi, thank you for your time. You're awesome as well. And we will see you guys on the other side. Shalom, everybody. And have a great rest of your week. I've got no more shows for you this week. Sunday is off. Rabbi Singer is still out of pocket. He'll be back in 2 weeks. So Monday morning, Rabbi Skobac, we should be back on Realm with him. And then Monday night with Rabbi Stuart Federow. You have a good night. Thank you, guys.
אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד איפוק זו העוצמה ויתור זו הגדולה השאיפה והכמיהה אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד